Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today we're going to have a more kind of relaxed, casual discussion, which is a bit of a departure from my usual format. Rest assured, Wings will be returning, but today I thought we'd do just a more relaxed discussion video over Star Trek Discovery. Now, it's very hard to stay relaxed talking about Star Trek Discovery. But, we're going to try. So, for all of you caught up to date, we see the Enterprise, Pike's Enterprise, at the end of Season 1 of Discovery. And people have worked out what size that ship was. So, in terms of size, people concluded that it was about 442 meters long. Now, that is very clear and distinct evidence that Discovery, Star Trek Discovery as a series, is operating on a very different scale compared to the rest of canon Star Trek, and that's fine because now we can reconcile it because we have the scale for the original. We have the original scale Enterprise, and we have this new scale, and from that we can deduce the scale factor, and then from that we can deduce the canon size of these ships in Discovery. So that's what I did. I went in with a calculator, didn't take much. You divide 442 meters by 289, what do you get? 1.529. That's rounding up. That's rounding. It's 1.529. 1.529. That's your scale factor. So if you then go and do all these other Discovery ships, including the Discovery herself, and apply this scale factor, you very quickly see that actually reconciling the Federation in Discovery isn't that difficult. It's not too bad. So I've got here this little chart that just really compares them. I haven't got all the ships, but I've got most of them. And yeah, it doesn't look too grievous, really, looking at it. And really, I'm just going to talk about the Federation ships in Discovery as a whole, generally, really, how I feel about them. So, let's look at the Walker. That's the first ship we see in Discovery. So, its original kind of screen scale, we'll call that, was 423 meters. Now, Reconciled, it is 318 meters. So it's a little bit bigger than the Constitution Enterprise, a little bit. The thing I say with a lot of these Discovery ships, and the thing that really kind of makes them distinct, and the reason they have, I think, quite the inflated scale, particularly some of them, is the style of nacelles. Is the fact that most of the nacelles are very long and sweep a long way back. So they actually add a big amount of mass to the ship compared to the Enterprise's nacelles, which add on less than 100 meters of length. The majority of its length is in front of the nacelles and contained within that. So it's a fairly accurate measure. Now the Walker's not too grievous, like I say. It's about 380 meters. It's big, but it's not out of proportion. And if you look at it compared to the Miranda, and in fact one thing I'm going to argue is the kind of the foreshadowing of the Miranda. So you have a Miranda which is about 243 meters, smaller, slightly, but much more robust looking. Very kind of, squared off, very neat. The Walker does look very not haphazard, but a little bit flimsy. Another ship I'm going to talk about here is actually the Nimitz class as well. Mostly because I love the Nimitz class. Out of all the ships of Discovery, I just like it. I like the red coloration. I like that way of doing the four-nacelle ship. It's one we haven't really seen before. It just looks really nice, and I think it works well. Um, I mean, that's all I can really say. But what I will say is that, you take the Walker and you take the Nimitz, and it's like, actually they kind of had these two designs. The Walker feels like, because they have a similar coloration, so I think they were almost, the Walker and the Nimitz are actually cut from the same cloth. One is perhaps more of an exploration long-range vessel in the form of the Walker, or well, no, actually, the Nimitz is probably the more long-range vessel, and the Walker's kind of more short-range. Um, but yes, essentially they are of the same breed, as it were. So then the Miranda being the future of that, and we've seen variants with the Miranda class in and of itself. You have the Soyuz class, which is strange looking, and very hard to find pictures of. So it doesn't look too grievous, and most of the other ships look fine. Some of them are a bit boring. Some of them very strange. The Cardenius is a very strange looking ship. Its reconciled scale is 332. It is big. At the same time, I'm going to say this again. How much of that is actually ship and how much of that is actually nacelles? Majority of that is actually, well, not majority, but a good chunk of that length is warp engines. But it is a bit big, and it is probably the hardest to fit in. Looking again at the Shepherd class, which is the USS Gagarin, that's 380 meters. Again, not bad. That's the cannon scale, the reconciled scale. That's not bad. And again, looking at those engines, majority of that is essentially engines. So really, actually, a lot of these are only a little bit beefed up Constitution saucers, basically. They're the Constitution saucer, but beefed up a little bit. Then, of course, we get to the Prime Offender, and I'm going to really get a little bit... we get to the Prime Offender here, and I'm going to be very honest. I've never liked the Discovery we ended up with. I liked the teaser version, the one with the shorter nacelles. I thought that looked much more retro and cool looking. I'm not really keen. I've never been keen on this look of the Discovery. So we have the Crossfield. Now its screen scale is 751 meters, which is of course ludicrous. That's longer than most 24th century ships. Now Reconciled, it is still pretty big. It's 564 meters. What am I going to say though? I'm going to say exactly what I've said with a lot of these ships. How much of that is engines? Well, with the Discovery, and this is why I hate this version of the Discovery so much, its engines are ludicrously long. We're not talking about engines that are about 100 meters longer. No, we are talking engines that are, in the region of 200 meters long in and of themselves, long after they've left the ship's mass, like long after they're no longer parallel with actual inhabitable space. They drag out for an absurd length behind them, and it doesn't work with the ship's design, the ship's shape, and I've said that from the very start. It looks like there's two different things going on. It doesn't feel unified. But this reconciled scale of 564 meters, and you take out the engines from that, which is most of that, it's not actually that big. It's about on par with the Constitution, but again, it's much more flimsy. It's also worth noting that the Enterprise, by the time of Discovery, is not quite old, but is a well-in-service ship at this point. This isn't, the 4 Years' War FASA, where, the Enterprise is brand new. I think, Discovery is after that. So the Enterprise has been in service for a while, and we know that the Discovery is brand new. So, it would be a bit bigger. And actually, I think it's less. I think it's actually perhaps maybe more fair to compare the Discovery, the Crossfield class, not to the Constitution and not to that era of ships. Instead, I think it actually may be worth looking at it as the kind of the predecessor, or the first one of the kind of the Excelsior era, the Excelsior wave of ships. And the Excelsior is, of course, a very big ship. It's 467 meters in length, so it's quite a big ship. You put Discovery next to that, and again, it does have that more drawn out, stretched look like Discovery. It's obviously there's I think, I'm not 100% familiar with the timeline, but I think it's probably 15 years before the Excelsior. Well, no, actually, probably more like 20 years before the Excelsior. But you can see, that's the way Starfleet is going in designs. So I don't think it really looks that bad, that egregious. I think you can reconcile it. It's aesthetically, I don't like that look for the Discovery, that whole stretched out look. It doesn't look good. I feel like it was just something that, one of the producers just came along and said, "Oh no, make the engines really long, it'll look really good." No, especially, and it also looks pretty absurd compared to a lot of the other ships where, okay, if they do have stretched out nacelles, they're not that absurd and egregious, and some of them don't even have it at all. The Nimitz class is a prime example. That has very reasonably proportioned engines, and that's really the only real problem with Discovery is, and why their lengths are so inflated, and the fact that they've gone up a scale factor. But you take that out, and then you take out the engine length, and you actually have ships that are not that outscaled for the time. It's not that grievous. So I think we're quite fortunate that we have that. We have that whole thing of the Discovery Constitution and the canon Constitution, and that's allowed us to reconcile it. So that's that's a positive note that I'm going to finish on. Star Trek Discovery isn't that contrary to canon in terms of scale, at the very least. What? Wait, what? Bloody... Klingon!